You're on the ride with the progress. The hills unexpressed. Oh yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Deep Sea Podcast, Pressurized, a short, punchy version of our main feed that gets right to the scientific point. If you like what you hear and you'd like to hear the full episode, you can find it in the same feed. And now, to get right to the point. When I'm talking to people, one of the things I say is the most exciting and rewarding part of my job, and one of the things that really makes me feel incredibly lucky to do it, is that I often get to see things for the very first time. Our lander systems come up, we pop out the memory card, and there is a good chance there'll be something on there that no human being has seen before. And I feel incredibly lucky to be the human being that is the first to see this. And it turns out that maybe that's not such a unique experience anymore. Nowadays, anyone with an internet connection can share in that experience. Our listeners may not be aware, there is actually multiple projects which live stream their deep sea exploration. So with just a couple of seconds delay, you can be present for deep sea discoveries as they are happening. The big players in this space are Schmidt Ocean Institute. They have started to live stream a lot of their dives with Sebastian, their ROV, Nautilus Live from the Ocean Exploration Trust, and NOAA Ocean Exploration with the Okeanos Explorer. Because of how the data is shared live with anyone who wants to watch it, communities have grown up around it. There are Twitter hashtags, Discord channels, online forums, where you can watch along and see discoveries as they happen and forge a bit of a community, basically. Get to know the other people who are just as interested. There's even the opportunity to get involved and become part of these communities. I'm lucky enough to have the chance to chat with Kasey Cantwell, Operations Chief for the NOAA Ocean Exploration Expeditions and the Exploration Division. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Always love talking to people about the work we do.
We'll have a lot of listeners who maybe aren't aware of the phenomenon I picked up a new word from a friend of mine. I was asking about this. Dive streaming, which is just an adorable little play on words, which I'm going to start using.
I haven't actually heard that one. That's great.
Could you summarize, just to begin with, what it is and the vessels and technology that you use?
Sure. So I'm really privileged to work for NOAA Ocean Exploration, which is a really incredible organization that spends the majority of our time filling gaps in our knowledge about the deep sea. And we have the incredible opportunity to explore some of the most remote and unknown areas of our ocean and basically ask the foundational question of what's there and what do we know about it, and hope that we can sort of close some of the basic gaps in our knowledge and our understanding about those areas.
What gear do you use? You've got some excellent toys and vessels.
We at NOAA Ocean Exploration use a couple different tools. The more traditional government role of, grant making and partnerships, where we provide funding or in-kind contributions to work together with other organizations. But one of the things that I'm actually a big part of and that I love the most is we use NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer as a way to explore the deep sea. So NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer is the U.S.'s only federal ship dedicated to ocean exploration. We call her America's ship for exploration. And it's one of the tools that we get to use to go thousands of miles offshore sometimes and explore miles deep and just see what's there.
When I'm, say, talking to school kids about what I enjoy with my work, it's very likely that I will see something that no one has seen before. And there's that absolute moment of discovery and being one of the first to see something. And you employ some very recent technology to allow both other scientists and the general public to feel a part of that. You stream your dives directly from the vessel.
Yeah. So one of the really cool things about what we do is we've taken the traditional aspects of being at sea, where you've got maybe 20 to 30 scientists out at sea and they're on a boat and they're conducting great science. And we've kind of opened that up to the world. So on board, we have a remotely operated vehicle. We actually have two of them, ROV Deep Discoverer and Sirius. So those two vehicles are tethered to the ship, which means that we get to see really cool stuff that's brought back in just a couple seconds from the seafloor all the way back to us, we can sometimes be miles away. Like I said, we go down to 6,000 meters. So sometimes the vehicles are quite far away from us. And then there's about a 1 to 2 second delay before we're able to share all of that, whatever it is that we're seeing in real time with folks on shore.
It's amazing that we can achieve that right now through satellites. Actually, just with a few seconds, other scientists and the general public are seeing things for the first time as you do on one of these expeditions, because they're often the pinch point. I'm so lucky if I get a berth on a vessel. I'm so lucky to be able to be out there and experience those things. And this technology just blows that exclusivity apart, and everyone can be involved and everyone can be a part of this.
Yeah. So one of the things that I absolutely love about exploration is you never know what you're going to find. So I've been out on missions where we have gone from looking at hydrothermal vents to deep sea coral and sponge habitats to being deep in a trench environment. And we're looking at old geological forms that no one's ever seen before. And then the next day we're diving on, in this case, it was an aircraft that had been lost in World War II. And the variety of things that we encompass with our operations and that we see in ocean exploration really requires a diverse team in order to support it. So in order to jump from hydrothermal vents to corals to shipwrecks to deep trench work, we have to be able to have a science team that is just as flexible and just as comprehensive as the habitats that we're going to encounter. So we use a technology called telepresence, which is really a fancy term for pretty much the technology that we all use in our everyday life now. It's the same kind of technology you use to stream Netflix, or the same technology that we're using right now to talk to each other. And that tech is what we can use to bring the deep sea to you at home and to bring it to you live so that you can be a part of this expedition.
When you're filling those berths, you don't know what you're going to find. So, what experts do you pick? What taxonomic experts do you bring along in the, say, maybe 4 or 5 berths that are available on the vessel? But now you see something totally unusual that's maybe from an animal group that you don't see very often and there aren't many experts on. And then the Twitter community will ping that image to the expert that they've sort of earmarked. And we see community and distributed science happening live.
I think one of the things that I love the most about it is that it's exactly as you said, we don't know what we're going to see. And that's what makes what we do so special and so unique. And what we've chosen on board the vessel that we use is to prioritize, I'll call them technicians. So folks that are subject matter experts in the technical aspects of the work that they do. They are engineers, they are data engineers, they're remotely operated vehicle pilots. They're basically a team that allows us to get the best quality imagery and send it to shore as quickly as possible. And then the majority of our actual science team, though, the folks that are looking at these unique environments and determining what's there and what the habitat looks like, what the community is. Answering the question of what is that, those folks are largely on shore. And we've done that intentionally so that we can have as many berths as possible dedicated to actually supporting the operations versus having to pick and choose which scientists we bring out. So we only bring out typically 2 to 3 scientists on each mission, and it's usually one subject matter expertise each. And their role is actually to be the team lead for that field, to speak for the folks that are on shore, to engage them, to empower them, to really make sure that we are doing the best possible science that we can, and that the folks who are on shore feel heard and feel empowered. And it's their job to sort of facilitate that process.
They're sort of your elected representative. They're
exactly
the single person who is enacting the will of the group. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the team captains.
I like it. One of the things that I really enjoy about this, and part of the aspect of this show, is the humanizing of scientists. I think the way that we write professionally, which is how we maintain our rigor, is very dry and very impersonal, because you want to try and remove as much personal bias as possible. And that has created the idea that that's who we are as people, and that we're a bit cold and we're a bit ivory tower and we're a bit distant. And I will never get tired of hearing someone who really genuinely loves what they research getting giddy, getting like really, really animated over what they're seeing. Like, I always love the audio that comes along with like some of this incredible deep sea footage. And then there is someone who it's their absolute passion in life, losing their mind. And it's so endearing and it's so humanizing. It's lovely to see scientists sort of enjoying their work.
When we bring people out on the ship, one of the first things that I tell them is to share your passion. It took a lot of time and effort and energy for you to get to this point, for you to have finished your degree, to do the work that you're doing, to become an expert in your field. But you had to have a lot of passion to get to this point. And what gets you through the long nights, the terrible tests, the points where you hit a wall is that passion and love for what we do, and love for ocean exploration and love for the deep sea. So I always am telling people to just share it. That's part of this. As much as we are out here doing science, we're also out here sharing what we do. And there's an engagement and outreach and education portion of the work that we do that is also equally important. sharing what we do is just as important as the work that we do. And sometimes that's really hard for scientists. So I actually love exactly what you're describing. It's one of my favorite points. There's two things that I love when we're doing our work. One is, just like you said, the times where you're just like, what on earth is this? And people are so excited. I can think of those moments from almost every expedition I've been out on. Times that you just couldn't stop smiling. Sometimes it was an unexpected shipwreck that we just discovered. Sometimes it was a brittle star, which is something that lives on the ground, that reached up and grabbed a squid out of the water column and then proceeded to eat it. Another time
you're meant to be a filter feeder. What are you doing?
Exactly. What on earth are you doing eating a squid that is the same size as your body? Probably.
Give me the Tipex. Give me the Tipex. All this is wrong.
It's like, I don't understand what this is. Another time we had just come upon a recently deceased swordfish. And all of those scenes that you see from Blue Planet and all the nature documentaries where you see sharks just like tearing into we call them whale falls. And this is an important part of what we know about the deep sea and the connection to the surface is anything that comes down into the deep sea becomes a source of food for the organisms that live down here. That's how the entire ecosystem survives in many cases. So those opportunities to see that are rare, and usually they're staged. For us, we actually came across a recently dead swordfish and it was being eaten by sharks. And as we sat there from 2.5 hours or so, and we just watched this swordfish be completely demolished. And on one hand, we just didn't have words for it, or just most of it was, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And on the other hand, you're also like, this is a really, really cool process. And I don't know how many times someone has filmed this when you've just stumbled upon it. Most of the time it's staged. Naturally. And it's a really cool thing to film. Even when it's staged, it's really unique. But to have just happened upon it, we were actually looking for a shipwreck that day. It was not a shipwreck, but we found something really cool instead. And I think that times like that are really when I personally begin to appreciate the way we do business. And this telepresence model is that we had an entire team of about 20 to 30 archaeologists on the line and talking to us, looking for this shipwreck. And this was a really incredible target. We had been looking for the Bloody Marsh, which we just actually a couple months ago found finally after 4 years of looking for it. We were working with these archaeologists and we circumnavigated this whole target. Well, are we ready to call that it's not a shipwreck? Because you have to kind of go through the whole process in the area, non-invasive archaeology. So we're looking around. We haven't collected any samples all day. And we're just like, all right, I think we have covered this entire target. It's not a shipwreck. We're kind of at the point where we need to say, let's proceed with just a regular exploration dive. Let's go look at the beautiful coral communities. Let's get some size estimates on those sponges over there. It was a really diverse coral and sponge area that we had found, which is also incredibly valuable. It just wasn't the shipwreck. So you see this natural transition begin to happen between our science teams. So our archaeologists kind of slowly begin fading out and being like, yep, this isn't a shipwreck. And the biologists and the geologists come in and sort of start taking over. And they start talking about, all right, well, let's go get some measurements on that sponge over there. That's not one that's known from this area. And then we find the swordfish.
You've essentially just had a crew change.
Yes.
That's not possible in the traditional way we do this.
Nope.
An opportunity presented itself and suddenly you've done a crew change without missing a beat. It's an incredibly dynamic way of sort of rolling with the punches because we don't know what we're going to find when we stick cameras down these places.
And that's what the beauty of telepresence is. We didn't know what it was. And we typically on these missions will have about 300 scientists or so sort of sign up to pay attention and to be on our listserv. And usually are just kind of like, a lot of them are kind of passive until something exciting interests them. But then we have about 100 to 140 or so scientists typically that are just actively engaged and are there every day participating with us. And some days when we're super, super deep, you're not going to have the shallower coral scientists participating, but you're going to have some really exciting geologists who are wanting to see deep into the bottom of a feature and see what that transition point looks like and what we can learn about geologic history. So this ability to be interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary is so unique with telepresence that it honestly allows us to have a bigger set of a science team than we could ever possibly have with just being on the vessel alone.
We had a chat with Mike Vicchioni a couple of episodes back, and he was sort of being asked by the media, like, how are you going to do this? How are you going to see more of these particular big fin squid that they're interviewing about? And he said, like, you can't plan an expedition to see these. It has to be opportunistic. We just need as many eyes in the deep sea as possible to roll with the punches. And when an opportunity arises, when an interesting observation comes our way, we get that in front of the relevant experts who can then decode that for us. And this just seems like the mature, complete version of that, have access to this huge wealth of knowledge that you wouldn't be able to fit on the boat.
He's exactly right. And that's exactly what we do. We've worked with Mike for a really long time, actually. And the best thing is that we don't know when we're going to see a squid or an octopus. I can tell you, though, every time we do, he's on the phone in about 5-10 minutes and we're talking about it.
He loves this stuff.
He does. And he's wonderful. And we actually have a great partnership with the Smithsonian, and where Mike works is the National Systematics Lab from NOAA. And those two organizations really support our operations because it gives curators the opportunity to see so many of the organisms alive for the first time. And you also get these really unique special instances where they're seeing things that like, I didn't know that was still alive. Like, this is something we know from the fossil record.
Wow.
This is very unusual. So we had this. So it's a snail and it lives on a stalked crinoid, which kind of looks like a giant feather duster. And we're sitting there and we're looking at it. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. It looks like it's laying eggs. And one of the gentlemen, Chris Moff from the Smithsonian, hops on the line and starts telling us, so this is really cool because we haven't seen this anywhere except for in the fossil record from the Paleozoic. I don't really know what to tell you this is because I don't have words. And that's the other time that I absolutely love, not only when scientists are really excited, but also when they're stumped. The line gets really, really quiet and everyone's just kind of sitting there staring at the screen and just like, so what is this? Silence. Well, so can you tell us a little bit more about what we're looking at? Silence. And you're just like, what? And over the years, I've come to learn that that's either, it's awe, or they're just like, I don't know. And they're not sure what to say because this is really rare. Or we've seen things in the Pacific Basin that are only known from the Caribbean or only known from the Atlantic. Or we've seen corals deeper than they've been known to exist anywhere. And those types of things, we get really excited about them because as scientists, this is why we're doing this, to learn more about these organisms, to learn more about the features that we're observing. But at the same time, I'm beginning to think that some of these things that we're so excited about because they're so rare or they're new or they're unique, that they're not as rare or new and unique as we think they are. It's just that we haven't seen much of the deep sea.
Yeah.
So little of the deep sea has been explored that the
data is rare.
It's just hard to know what is actually rare or not. The sponge that I was talking about that is only known from the Atlantic that we found in the Pacific, there might be hundreds of thousands of those sponges in the Pacific Basin.
It might be more common.
It might be more common there than it is here. Yeah. But if you're only looking at a small portion of an area, the distance that we can cover during an ROV dive is like 10 to 15 football fields. Think about that. The distance that you or I could cover in maybe like 15 minutes of running, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth across the football field. That's about how much distance we cover with a remotely operated vehicle dive. And that's because every minute we're sitting there and we're looking at something new or different and we're getting really good quality imagery because a lot of the times no one will ever come here again.
And your huge and sort of sprawling science, is it community more than team? I feel like we've crossed a bit of a boundary, but seeing that gastropod, seeing that snail lay those eggs, you need the knowledgeable pair of eyes looking at that to say that that's something unusual. Because sometimes the really surprising, the really unusual things, they require that trained eye to give it context. I might say like, oh, that's a pretty snail. That's interesting, but I'm horribly biased. Let's go look for some fish. And that's why this huge community almost removes any bias from the science. I can remember doing some ROV ops where we were all taking it in turns to log what was going on. And you could absolutely guess what that person's area of expertise was based on their logs. Purple thing, red thing, purple thing, and then a Latin name. And having this diverse group, you're going to spot the subtle but really important things.
So you're going to let me talk about every part of my job that I love, aren't you?
Let's go.
So one of the things that I honestly am most proud of our organization for doing, and that I feel is really one of the most important things that we do, is it's not the actual science that we conduct, while that is incredibly important and really useful, but it's how we conduct science. So we talked a little bit about the telepresence aspect and how we conduct, like, we're diving here today, let's go. but there are months and months and months of planning that goes into deciding that we're going to dive here today. And most people don't get to see that. But during that process, what we are doing during all that planning is we are developing a community. And we like to say that our operations are community driven. And what that means is that we're not out there investigating my personal questions as the operations chief, or even the personal questions of the people who are serving the role that would traditionally be called a chief scientist. Our team is of expedition coordinators, and they manage an expedition on behalf of the science community and on behalf of the resource management community. We're not out there answering any one person's questions, but rather have worked with the science community and have developed these priorities and got a good understanding of where the gaps are. Where don't you have information? What questions can't you even ask yet because you don't have enough basic understanding here? And that's the niche that we fill. We let the community guide us. We let the community help us and really become invested in our operations in a really unique way that doesn't really exist elsewhere, because we are focused on meeting their needs. And for some people, when they're first encountering us or they're first working with us, they're a little bit hesitant of, you want me to share data with you and you're just going to give me this for free. Yes, that's literally it. We are doing this on behalf of future generations of scientists who will use those data, because they'll realize that something that we just kind of looked at as a purple thing, as you said, or a pink thing or a green thing, or we just kind of went past it because we didn't know much about it then. But someone will look at that data set and say, that's rare. I've not seen that before. And that's the most exciting part about what we do. We collect data and it's made publicly accessible only a couple months after we collect it. We feed it into national data archives. We feed it into data models. And basically our team then moves on to the next site, to the next priority. It probably comes off a little strange to people at first, but once they get a chance to kind of experience it and really how flexible we are, how receptive we are to others' ideas, and how this community really embraces the work that we do, because it fills a very unique role that we get to go places that not many people have ever been. And we get to collect that initial data set that then helps them later guide further expeditions. It helps them later compete for funding to go and ask those scientific questions. We help them generate questions versus answering questions in many cases.
As a part of this, I mean, it's all been absolutely lovely so far, but there's an even extra lovely bit. This is a great remover of boundaries. People from developing nations who couldn't afford to join a scientific cruise, or people with limited mobility or other disabilities that makes actually going to sea impossible. How do we make this accessible to everyone? Because just the nature of being at sea is physical and is difficult. How can we share this? And I feel like this is it. This is doing it.
One of the things about the way that we do business and the way that we conduct our operations that is so special is exactly what you're describing. It's the ability to democratize ocean exploration and really take away some of the barriers that prevent people from joining. Ocean exploration fundamentally is full of barriers. And those are not just the traditional barriers that you described based on if people have disabilities, if they have family commitments, or just generally if you're from a marginalized group that hasn't had access to the same opportunities. All of those things play into every STEM workforce development issue. But then you add in the limited availability of ship time. You add in the limited availability of deep sea assets, and your pool of potential people just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And on top of all that, just that there are limited resources and limited assets, it's expensive. It's very expensive to go to sea. So you have to be at well-established institutions to be able to compete well. And it can get this really exclusionary club-like feel. And one of the things that is so incredible about what telepresence has done for this community, for our field, is that it has taken away that barrier. And that is so incredibly exciting.
And part of the sort of democratizing and the opening up of this as an access point is beyond career scientists. There is a huge public following. Whole communities have grown up around watching these streams. What do you think about this sort of more public community?
I absolutely love it. It is always really cool to be able to talk to folks, especially young kids who are really excited about the ocean or just excited to hear that this is a career path And honestly, for us, it's not just the kids that are interested in science. We have a lot of different career paths to get you into our operations. We have some folks who were artists in school, some folks that are professional videographers, some broadcast engineers, people that are robotics engineers, and we have several people on board the ship that have incredibly diverse backgrounds, and they're professional mariners or they're officers with the NOAA Corps. There's just so many ways that you can be a part of this.
Use it however you want. You touched upon art. We are scientists and we want to generate data and generate discoveries from this stuff. But you may be just as inspired as a poet, as an illustrator. There's nothing exclusionary about this data. This is incredible images of the natural world, which people can take all sorts of different things from.
There's an incredible program that's run by Schmidt Ocean Institute called their Artist at Sea program.
Yes.
And it is fascinating to see what, like, I look at the data that we collect and I see ones and zeros. I see, okay, this is what the seafloor looks like. This is what the organisms that are there. But then you see what an artist sees in looking at the same information that I see. And I am blown away when you go see those exhibits. Someone who's not as close to it, not as in the weeds as you are. And it's really, really inspiring.
One of the things I enjoyed most was an illustrator that I follow. And actually, this is how I found them, and would just do illustrations sort of based on what was going on. And they did this really beautiful one of, it was a chimera, and then deep sea scientists discover a new fish and spend 10 minutes telling it how beautiful it is. And then there was this beautiful illustration of a chimera like blushing and putting its pectoral fins up to its cheeks, like it was a bit sort of shy, but kind of liking it at the same time.
That is amazing.
I'll track it down for you. I might even get in touch with them and see if we can use it. That level of creativity and sort of fun and that sense of community that just forms organically around what's going on here.
It is always really cool to hear about how people have been touched by the work that we do. And sometimes you forget the impact that you have on others. Like when we do public events and stuff, we pretty much always have at least a couple of people who are like, I've been following you guys for years. Like, this is so cool. You're like, oh, really?
We're a weird insular bunch, and we are immensely flattered if we reach anyone, and even more fascinated if they can interpret and get from what we see every day something that we totally missed. It's beautiful.
I completely agree. Follow along with us. We spent a lot of time here talking about how cool this world is and how exciting it is that you can watch it at home, but actually do it. Like, go on oceanexplorer.noaa.gov and follow along with us. Fantastic.
Definitely sign into that. If you're working on dual monitors, just always have the other one open, and you never know when something fascinating that actually might be an absolute scientific breakthrough that you're witnessing firsthand along with the people operating it. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to watching because I can.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
And that was a pressurized version of one of our longer episodes. If you enjoyed that and you would like to hear the full length episode, just match the episode numbers and you'll be able to find the full length version in the feed. Thanks for listening. We'll deep see you next time, and I abyss you already.